filling the gaps. It's a pretty broad brief. The opportunities to create better connected, affordable and smarter cities. We're going to do our best to make sure that we aren't just filling the gap in the program before lunchtime, but also filling the gap between my pet subjects and the panelists' pet subjects. Please shoot your questions through to Slido to make sure that we're hitting the topics that you want to hear about. We've heard plenty today about the growth challenge that we have in Southwest Sydney and what government is doing to address it, to get housing going more quickly, to get infrastructure built ahead of time if that's possible. And we've also heard from Adam, from Christopher, from the Mayor and also the local member Greg Warren about the need to get cracking with the next generation of major infrastructure to support what will be a lot of development activity in Southwest Sydney in the next 10, 20 years and beyond. Bringing it back to the present day, our team crunched the numbers, and I think it was in the media this morning. We've got this challenge where over the next 5 years we need to build 34 homes per day. That's pretty staggering. And we've also got an affordability crisis, a crisis in being able to get the people and the materials to build all of that. So we're starting from a crisis situation. So I'm told there's no need to panic, but I'm not so sure. Starting with Jen, when it comes to building, what we need to build, we need the workers, obviously. TAFE is a critical, probably the most important stakeholder in getting apprentices on site, getting the future tradies through the system and into the workforce. Does that figure 34 homes each day, does that cause you great panic? Is it possible to get the number of workers that we need?
Thanks, Luke. Slight panic, and I think probably more so industry would be nervous about that. TAFE New South Wales, we train people that come to us. We have issues with our capacity to train apprentices, but at the moment in the faculty that I lead, we have about 35 to 40,000 apprentices. If that increases, which I expect that it should over the next few years, our issues will be the ability to meet that demand. At the moment, we're pretty much meeting it, but it's getting them employed in industry. One of the things, like everyone's saying, it's great, we've got a great apprenticeship system. There's, a few things that need tweaking, but I think it's really important that we encourage people into apprenticeships, not as a secondary career, but, like quite often I hear people say, oh, you didn't get into uni, so why don't you go and do a trade? We should probably encourage people, a trade can be the first option.
So just following up on that, you've got a large volume of apprentices in the pipeline. If we can talk about people in that way, I'm not sure we can. You'll have, obviously the standard profile of tradies that come through your system are school leavers or the younger people. Do we need to also be, can we achieve the level of construction workers that we need through that traditional pipeline, or do we need to be, what role does skilled labour migration play in it, and getting new people who mature age apprentices or people who are making a career change that previously were not part of the typical profile of TAFE enrolments?
Yeah, we've got to overcome a few barriers there. The traditional pathways for students, when they leave school, they go into an apprenticeship. Adult apprentices are few and far between, and that's because of the actual cost that it costs the contractors. The other area that we can look at, and I think tier ones are getting this right, but any other contractors need to start expanding their recruitment strategies to ensure that they're looking at 100% of the workforce rather than the traditional male-dominated 50% of the workforce. I think But it's not only recruitment strategies, it's attraction and retention strategies. A lot of people leave the trades after, or get promoted, or go off the tools after about 3 years post-trade. So it's what we can do in order to keep them on the tools.
Yep. Now, I wanted to jump to you, Michael. Obviously, while ever there's a lot of construction activity happening in the private sector, in the civil sector, there's a lot of work, there's a lot of opportunities for like local supply chains as well as the tradies. But I wanted to ask you about the role of building social housing as a counter-cyclical policy lever that government has, because we've got a huge construction workforce in Western Sydney, a lot of construction-oriented businesses, manufacturers, etc. Wanted you to comment on the role that your agency can play in, smoothing the peaks and troughs that we see in private construction, and perhaps run us through how you're working with the huge amount of money that's just been injected into social and affordable housing to stage that out over, a period of years to make sure there's a steady flow.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. Yes, we did get a lot of money. It's the largest investment in social housing made by the New South Wales Government, $5.1 billion. We do have to deliver 8,400 homes for ourselves, but the way we do it will be in partnership especially with community housing providers mainly, but also developers, and that will include enhancements extra on top of that, affordable housing and also market housing. So how are we going to do it? Yes, when there is market failure, and it's a blunt term, but we are seeing elements of market failure at the moment. We've been talking about it all morning. And there is a role for government to step up and step in where market failure exists. And so we will be and looking at different ways to procure, appropriate sharing of risk to take, rather than pushing all the risk off government onto private sector. We need to share that risk and make projects easier to get going. That is important. From a Homes New South Wales point of view, we are not for profit. Our job is to maximise outcomes in social and affordable housing. So we have a real role to play to partner more effectively, to support the people and groups that we work with to actually get things going. It is only 8,400 homes in the scale of things. That is 5 to 10%, but it will really help to keep things going. And in that, and we've demonstrated this, we have a really strong partnership with TAFE on apprentices on our projects, and we have for a number of years, and we have had hundreds of apprentices going through that we've supported in our program. So again, that's something we actively do to support getting the housing going and affordability. We were certainly thrilled to see that budget allocation, and I think a really important change in the way we speak about social and affordable housing from government, and echoing what we've heard from our partners is the focus on well-located social and affordable housing, which translates to being close to transport, being close to services, and we've also seen, a shift in government and in accelerating, planning approvals and the like to transit-oriented development, which is something that transport and planning nuts have been speaking about for literally 20 plus years. It's now in the government vernacular, which is great. Which I guess is my long-winded segue to you, Leanne. Sydney Metro's been operating in Sydney for a few years now. Most of the city hasn't had a reason to get up to the northwest and jump on a train. Could probably count on one hand the number of times I've seen a metro train. I know they're there. That's all about to change in a couple of weeks, give or take, depending on the firemen's union and what happens there. But
we're about to see this explosion in awareness of Sydney Metro with the line through the city. Obviously, it's not going to come this far out to the southwest, eventually to Bankstown. And people will see, I guess, the placemaking potential that Metro can generate. First, I'm keen to get a comment from you about that, because I know that within government, within Metro, there's a lot of excitement about the big reveal. But for this part of the world, and I promised you I wouldn't ask you to comment on the future extensions of Metro, which it's our job to kind of lobby for that, not yours. But also want to hear from you about the placemaking that's going on the Western Sydney Airport Metro line, which is probably what we can expect in this part of the world for future metro stations when they happen, hopefully sooner, not later.
Thanks. Is that on? Yep. We are very excited and very, very busy. So just to touch on what we're doing, so we have a once-in-a-generational change coming our way with the City Line opening and targeting the 4th of August, so just around the corner. Truly, I'm not sure Sydney really knows what they're about to see and what they're about to experience. For us, that's truly exciting. In terms of the placemaking side of things, so at Metro, we have a dual mandate, really. We deliver the transport, which is truly a turn up and go service. We will see on the City Line a train every 4 minutes in peak. We will be moving, we anticipate, something like 37,000 people just in the peak period in the morning. And just for a bit of fun, that's something like 70 A380s. You know, it's just an extraordinary transition that we will see. And along with that, the placemaking that comes with it and the connectivity is really, really important for us. Because our second mandate is to deliver and work with development partners to develop out our precincts. And so we do have a number of precincts across both the northwest, which we work very closely with Landcom in partnership to deliver, through the city, where you'll see some of these larger, at-scale integrated station developments that are coming to life. And then out here in Western Sydney Airport line, we've got some really fantastic opportunities coming. So if I just talk to Western Sydney Airport, Western Sydney Airport, we're looking at the moment, we have finished all of our tunnelling projects. We are now moving above ground to work on the station delivery. There'll be 6 stations connecting St Mary's through to the new airport and to Bradfield City. The extraordinary change that is happening in Greater Western Sydney is also once in a generation. We will see places come to life. We are working with the Department of Planning as well, where we're creating, they have extended beyond the boundaries that Metro have through their TOD precincts to create urban renewal. We will be delivering, we anticipate to deliver or facilitate delivery of some 2,600 dwellings just along the Western Sydney Airport line. And across all of our projects for the areas of land that Metro do control, we will be delivering up to 15,000 dwellings. So it's really exciting for us. That's not including the commercial opportunities, because for us, placemaking is 24/7. It's about the mix of uses. It's about the activation between peak periods. It's retail, it's commercial, it's the parks and the open spaces. So we collaborate with many parts of government and the private sector to make sure that it's holistic development. So we're pretty excited by that.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for Sydney Metro, definitely. Bill, throwing to you, Western Sydney Uni is probably the biggest brand across Western Sydney. It's a key kind of anchor in a lot of our city centres. A lot of your good work has, been those downtown campuses with the logo on the top. We've heard you speak a lot about the role of, providing access to tertiary education and an activity hub in those city centres. Also heard you speak quite passionately, particularly about the newest Bankstown campus, about the role that it has as a community hub, not just for uni students, but for members of the community, for school students to get in and have a place to go. Just wanted you to, I guess, give us a bit of a comment on the role that you see, not just WSU, but other universities playing in the placemaking that we want to happen across Western Sydney and Southwest particularly.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think what's important to note is that, and our new Vice-Chancellor this week has been very vocal and across the papers talking about how we like to talk about ourselves a lot and forget about why we're here. And one of the things that we need to focus on is what we've done and why we're here and the community that we serve. I think, it's all right. The work that we do with TAFE in collaborating, that vertical integration in education and the approach of that and how industry plays a significant role in creating that, the work we're doing with transport is all one of the points that we need to focus on. We're here today to talk about how do we create homes, social affordable homes, how do we increase capacity, density, but how do we make a place? Now, without education, without work, without critical mass, that just cannot happen. And we've seen that if you look across Western Sydney. You look at Parramatta 6-7 years ago, before Western decided to do our Parramatta City campus and then Walker taking the punt in doing Parramatta Square. It was a dead zone. At 2 o'clock, you couldn't even get a coffee. Our students that are doing postgraduate studies in one PSQ were going out for a coffee at 5:15 and that 7:15 break. There was nothing to do. It was taking that chance to create that. Now, what does that mean? It means bringing people in. It means bringing in the passive surveillance and that nighttime economy and that integration with the community, opening those spaces 24/7. All our vertical campuses. I've just come back from Adelaide yesterday, where all, Flinders, UniSA, or what are they going to call it? University of Adelaide now is the merger. They're all doing the vertical CBD campuses, but no one's looking at the precinct. No one is looking how that's going to work with each other. They got this vertical building and they think that's going to take care of everything. It doesn't work. That's one of the learnings we had, and Bankstown has been that. Earlier last year we had some significant issues around behaviour on the campus, and it was behaviour because, the kids, the high school kids, didn't have such a facility or such a place to go to before, and they didn't know what it meant to have that opportunity. And it took us, with some of the Centre for Western Sydney, some of our academics, our School of Education, to run some workshops with some of those kids, the leaders, and have an understanding of, well, what are you looking for, what are you after, and what is aspiring you to do here. And, they don't all want to go to uni, and that's great. We need people to go to TAFE, but it was like, you're now being given an opportunity, you're being recognised as a community in the Southwest that has never been given such an opportunity before. Here's something to aspire to, here's something to do. With the innovation, activation plans that Metro's doing now that are going to be place-led off the back of the place-based strategies, transport strategies that were done, these kids will now have time to interact and inform what that engagement in those communities happen. The thing we have to do, though, is not give up on, I know census data this year has recently come out talking about Western Sydney now having tertiary attainment and skills training above the national average. Yeah, that's great. When we take on, we talked about Wollongong all the way to the Hunter, but once we get to the Richmond Road, and south of that, it's still sitting at that 17%. Now let's talk about that and talk about the transport that we talked about. Lindy mentioned about Todd plans and how Campbelltown's ignored. Well, why? Yes, it doesn't have Metro, but once Metro goes to Bankstown, there'll be infrastructure to double the capacity of the heavy rail out to Campbelltown. That's bad news for the Western Sydney Airport, because you'll be able to get to Kingsford Smith in less than half the time than You can to Badgerys, but that's because there's no infrastructure. But let's talk about that. Campbelltown should be thought about as that. They're ready to go. It's here. The people are here. I just think there's lots to say, and I've gone all over the place because there's so much to say. I'll leave it at that. I hope I answered the question, but we've got to focus on who we're serving. And I look in this room, and I don't think this represents the people that we're serving.
Absolutely, yeah. You did answer the question in a roundabout way, and you've helped lead me to my next question. Around you talk about, who is it all for? Southwest Sydney, Greater Western Sydney, as well. This is going back a long time now, but was traditionally a place that people could afford to buy a house, where you would move to get ahead. That's all changed. I don't think there's affordable housing really anywhere anymore for certainly for lower income earners. But I wanted to get your views on this, Jen, and going back to my comment previously, the typical person embarking on an apprenticeship makes that decision because it's a pathway for them, but there's a few years where things are hard financially. Are we seeing the affordability of housing as a barrier for people enrolling in TAFE, in apprenticeships, even if there is a light at the end of the tunnel? I mentioned to you before, I've got a family member who's embarking on a mature age apprenticeship and had to do a lot of maths about whether it was actually affordable to keep servicing a mortgage and take that income hit for a few years. How do we overcome that if we want to get the volume of workers we need?
It's really difficult for being on apprentice wages. I have 2 man children that still live at home, 27 and 24. One's a qualified tradesperson who's saving to buy his first house. So much like the member for Campbelltown also mentioned that he also had adult children at home. I think on apprentice wages under the age of 21 is really low wages. But what the benefit of it is that they're getting paid while they get educated. So they're learning a skill, they're coming to TAFE, they're getting a qualification, and it's creating a legacy and a skilled workforce. So that's the benefits that I can promote as far as when I speak to my friends and families who are ever thinking of going into an apprenticeship. Adult apprentices, it made it really difficult probably 10 years ago when the subsidy was removed from the adult apprentice wages. What we saw then was a lot of larger employers would not take on adult apprentices and because it just cost them too much money. It can cost up to an extra $400 a week for an apprentice. I think what I see with learners now, or apprentices that are with TAFE New South Wales, they're staying at home a lot longer than, say, what they would have done back in the olden days in my generation. And they're just trying to save. And a lot of young people are also moving out of the metropolitan area and into regional areas where the housing is more affordable. Unfortunately, that's not the solution that we want, but that's the reality of what's happening.
Thankfully we've got someone on the panel who has an answer to housing affordability at the lower end of the market anyway. Michael, in recent years, the talk has increased in policy circles about diversity in the housing stock, having a diverse supply to match the diverse demand profile rather than just, rent, own, social housing. What needs to happen from Homes New South Wales perspective to make sure that there's more in the gap between social and market rental housing that we can, service the needs of people who maybe want to go through a career change or just want to live close to where they study or where they need to work?
Housing affordability. We all like to have solutions, but the fact is there's not one dominating solution. We have to tackle everything. Everything that everyone talks about, every idea, you have to pull on every lever as hard as you can. And so we've got to work through each of the different cohorts, each of the different segments in the market to sort of address housing affordability. So at the bottom end, at the very most vulnerable, in terms of where Homes New South Wales focuses, we've got the funding, we're getting on, we're cracking on. Our job is also to support the system, especially CHPs, to cover that the range from the most vulnerable through to key worker housing and into market housing. Now, we are very fortunate in New South Wales. We have an exceptionally strong community housing provider sector that can really bring a lot to the table in terms of affordability, and there are different categories of affordability. A lot of people like to look at key worker housing because the revenues are higher, but there are other degrees, low income affordable housing, and we need to look at how we get that diversity. So there was a lot of discussion around diversity of housing typology, which is critical, but it's also diversity of tenure is exceptionally important. And the thing, I think, another important area to focus on is the rental reform, because home ownership is decreasing in Australia. It was 65%. It has dropped down into the 50s, 56, 57. That puts a lot more importance on having genuine rental reforms and rental protections as to give people that viable option for renting long term. At the moment, I think our society is not set up for that, like we are, like they are in Europe and other areas. So the diversity of tenure is exceptionally important, and we are working with the sectors to fill in those gaps, using our facilities and our land to help strengthen the community housing provider sector, as well as looking at rental laws, as well as looking at all the other things around market housing.
There's just a few issues in housing to deal with, yeah. You mentioned rental reform. Obviously, it's really important just to reflect the way that people are living. Now I think it's between 30 and 40% of people live in rentals. We're also seeing a bit of a rise in Australia and in Sydney of interest in investing in build-to-rent projects. And Leanne, I just wanted to ask you, in terms of the placemaking around Sydney Metro precincts, there's obviously with the TOD program, low targets have been set for social and affordable housing, but based on what's viable at the moment, is there potential for higher targets, or perhaps the integration of more build-to-rent kind of tenure types in metro precincts? Or are you really looking at commercial and highest and best use for the land you're dealing with?
Thanks for the question. We look at all of it. It's really, really important to have the diversity. In regards to build-to-rent, what I'll start with is every site is different. Every site and the viability of every site is different for the private sector, for the public sector, and for Homes New South Wales. So every site has a different approach, as does every precinct for our stations as well. But the diversity is key to activated precincts. Doesn't matter whether you're delivering metros or you're delivering private developments, every developer will look for diversity. That's really important because it creates those activated precincts. Diversity of people, diversity of uses, diversity of tenures. So Metro has a variety of precincts in terms of the dwelling types. We do have a build-to-rent product already being delivered in the city. Yes, it is a CBD location. And build-to-rent's a really complex land use and tenure for a variety of reasons in Sydney, principally because land values are so high. But in terms of the role that we play at Metro, we're very fortunate to be able to engage with the private sector, and it's really important for us to be able to receive the feedback from the private sector to ensure that we enable development that is viable, that is also useful, that activates our precincts. And so because we own the land, much of the cases we enter into project delivery agreements, which also helps developers to be able to make them more viable. We work very closely with we're working closely with homes as well to seeing what opportunities exist on our land for the use of social or affordable housing, and we work very closely with Landcom already on the Northwest Precinct as our partner to deliver quite a diverse range of housing supply there as well. We're already involved in affordable housing. We've been doing that long before the TOD program that extends beyond our boundaries, and will continue to implement those government objectives for affordable and social housing where possible. We think it's the right thing to do. Not only is it suitable for the Western Sydney and Northwest precincts, it's suitable for the CBD as well. So it needs to be a variety in all locations. So we'll continue to work with our partners, private and public sector partners, to deliver.
Thanks. A comment, more of a question from me. The blurb for this panel said that Sydney's embracing the TOD model, and Adam and I went to a parliamentary inquiry, and I know you were at it this week, Michael. Apparently not all of Sydney's embracing it, but I think in this part of the world people see the benefit of it and the need for a more sustainable way of managing growth. Our time is quickly running out, and we were cut short to make sure that we get to lunch on time and more networking for everyone. So I was going to throw some fast Slido questions out to a few of you. We've got a question here from Nick about TAFE. When can Campbelltown TAFE have a nursing and trade centre of excellence? Now, Jen, you don't need to comment on what can or can't happen in Campbelltown TAFE, but since we're in Campbelltown, we know that there's a huge demand for health workers, obviously construction workers we were talking about. Any comments you can provide on what does happen or needs to happen in Campbelltown with TAFE?
As far as my faculty goes, so construction and energy, that's anything that sits within that space, including civil construction and surveying. We don't currently do delivery at Campbelltown. We have Macfields and Miller are probably the closest campuses where we have strong construction trades. We do have centres of excellence planned, which were a government commitment at the last election, 3 for TAFE New South Wales, and one of those will be located in Western Sydney. It will have an advanced manufacturing focus. However, what else it has attached to it is yet to be decided. I can't answer about nursing, it's sort of outside my remit, but what I can say is from a construction perspective, I've recognised with my team and TAFE infrastructure team that there is certainly a gap between where we do our educational delivery, and Campbelltown seems like a perfect location. However, we need money for that to build our resources too.
We'll take it up with you, Minister. And one for you, Bill, a question from Anonymous. Peter Shergold had a vision for WSU helping with the affordable housing issues facing the communities that it serves. What is WSU doing or planning in this area?
That's a great question, and in the next couple of months we'll be releasing a paper on this specific item. I think one of the questions we need to ask is what are we all doing in addressing this specific question? We talk about build to rent. I don't think what's being delivered today is a true build to rent to product, and I think there needs to be reform change in ensuring that that's the case, and ensuring that if it is build to rent, people are getting tenure and not 3 years, 5 to 10 years, and we look at that doing that. But we also look at the different types of build to rent and the multi-generational requirement of that product and how it happens. We talk about social and affordable housing in southwest Sydney, yet we're slugging each developer about $100,000 a pop before they even throw a shovel at the ground, right? That's going to be passed through somewhere. Not because the developer's greedy, because they want to make greater returns. There are some out there that are looking at 3.5%, 4.5% for a longer period of time, but purely that the smaller ones need to show a 22% return minimum to raise capital to fund those projects. Let's look at how many DAs currently exist in southwest Sydney that cannot be funded. Or let's look at the ones that can be funded, but the infrastructure can't keep up to make them happen. So these are the things we'll be talking about. We'll also be talking about the fact that not only is state government charging levies, but some councils have taken it upon themselves. They don't have the charter under the Office of Local Government to do so, but they are charging a percentage on every dwelling, putting it away in their coffers, creating a return, but they cannot use those funds to deliver on that outcome. So let's look at that as well and reconcile that, because that 6% can come off the purchase price. I think they're the things we'll be calling out. We're going to be pretty hard on it, and there's going to be about 4 councils that are not going to be happy with us.
Looking forward to that. Yeah, the affordable housing levy is something that we've been looking at a little bit. Anyone else wanted to comment on that? It's in your patch, Michael. I'm not pushing a public servant to make a political statement, but we can maybe leave that to Bill. Okay.
I could say more.
I know you can, Bill, but we are out of time, ladies and gentlemen. Please thank our panellists. We did promise to get you to lunch on time, and I think we've done that.